Hello, BookTube, and I'm coming to you with a new or a different camera on a different tablet. It's more in your face. Yeah, pretty scary, isn't it? Well, that actually fits for Horror Mayhem, and we are now approaching week 2, which is Gothic. And I thought I'd do a little video, just what is Gothic, Gothic literature. To different people, it means different things, and I'll give you sort of my spin on it to a certain extent. And the spin usually comes from the individuals that are describing it, emphasizing one aspect or a couple aspects of it over other aspects of it. Gothic architecture, which was named, sort of developed in the High Middle Ages around 12th century AD in Europe, and it was named after the Goths who sacked Rome. And it's always been considered, or has been for a long time, or was considered a barbarous sort of architecture. It's very ornate, carved with gargoyles. If you think of these, huge cathedrals, these piles and cathels with, detailed edges that when you look close, you can see these things, not just the gargoyles, but other little detailed motifs, and usually it's in a barbarous way or sexual. It's and many times. So that's where sort of the term came from. Then the question is, well, how does it get into literature? Well, during the 18th century, Horace Walpole wrote a book called The Castle of Otranto, and he called it a Gothic. What did he call it? Gothic romance or Gothic fantasy? And it just sort of harkened back to something that was old, pretending it was real. But it had elements of romance. It had elements coming out of the past. It had supernatural elements. It had a hero, damsel in distress, like all these things that we sort of do think of as Gothic nowadays. So it began around that time. So it was a label that was started to be put on fiction, but it was in its infancy, so it was growing. And Radcliffe, another writer in the late 18th century, started writing fiction that was considered Gothic. Into the 19th century, we've got Mary Shelley. I'm just popping out a few names here, not there's all sorts of ones, but Mary Shelley with Frankenstein. It's Gothic. Some people call it horror. There's horrific elements in it, but it's sort of the basis of science fiction because it's a doctor doing scientific work, and with galvanism and so forth. But it's it has all these elements. It's got sort of castles. It's got these dripping walls and stuff like this of mold and everything, and sort of secrets. That's another big thing. But this all sort of too was part of the Romanticism movement at the time as well. So it sort of grew out of Romanticism. I guess I think I've seen it referred to as dark Romanticism rather than Gothic. Just calling it dark Romanticism. So and then we continue on, and then we pop to the New World, say for instance, and we've got Edgar Allan Poe. Not that long after Mary Shelley in the 1830s, 40s. Writing, and the one that most people think of is is the House of Usher. And again, it's a moldy pile, in sort of swampy area, and it's just the walls are dripping almost with mold and mildew and damp, and there's secrets, and damsels. There's a sort of a hero, and sometimes there's anti-heroes in stories too. But uh, it's it's sort of secrets from the past that have sort of visited upon the present that have always been there. But in outwardly looking, everything looks fine, but there's internal rot, and that's kind of almost, I think, the basis of of uh, of Gothic. But because now you've got Edgar Allan Poe writing, this is sort of New World Gothic. It's no longer Old World. This is Southern Gothic. Well, that's actually it's not quite Southern Gothic yet, but we've got other things that are Southern Gothic. We got New England Gothic, and it spreads up. There's Gothic from all over the place. There's sort of its own English Gothic from England, Irish. There is France, everywhere, even into Latin America and stuff, because it's sort of is growing and permeated anything that's sort of dark and mysterious in some ways. It's infused itself into the writing of many areas in the world. So, and then we continue on, and one that most people sort of think of as pure Gothic is Dracula, because you've got this decaying castle in Transylvania, you know, and he is decaying. He's old, and corpses, and you know, secrets to be held, and the castle looks idyllic from a long ways away, but coming up close, it's not. And also around that time, we've got as I say, I'm just throwing out a few things here. We've got the Turn of the Screw by Henry James, where again you've got this. It looks idyllic. This place where the tutor, the governess, is going, and it looks idyllic. But then once it gets up close, there's sort of a rot. There's something. There's a mystery. There's a history that's running through it, and a supernatural. And there's always, generally, there should be, for the horror part, there should be a supernatural thing. And there's romanticism, as I say. There's a lot of antiquarianism with this kind of stuff too, because in some ways, M.R. James could be classed as Gothic as well in many ways, because he's got moldy old libraries, moldy old crypts and things like this, and secrets hidden in a book, say for instance, that are coming out and coming to life, and the supernatural. That's where the supernatural sort of comes in. But back to Turn of the Screw, and if anybody has seen the 1960s film The Innocents, that is a pure example of a mesh between Southern Gothic and traditional European Gothic. And again, it's visually stunning, because Deborah Carr's character shows up at this place, and it's idyllic, sun shining and everything like that, and everything looks good and it looks clean. But then she goes to touch the flowers, and the petals die, like they're dead. They're ready to crumble, and they show scenes of gargoyles and things like this, and there's secrets to be hidden, and there's a supernatural element. Is it there or is it not? And is she going crazy, or is she seeing these things real? Is there repressed sexuality in this? It's all these things, and but sort of put together in a package. But I sort of think that it has to have something like there's a secret or something. The past is ever present in the present, and it's rotting the present, and it's been rotting everything since then. As I say, from external looks, everything looks idyllic, but there's internal rot. And as I say, that's where Dracula sort of comes in. He by the time he gets to England, he is the suave gentleman about town, a ladies' man, sort of, in a sense. At least that's how they portray it in the films. but all this stuff, it works all together. But there's an internal rot in him, evilness. And architecture plays a huge amount, and it again harkens back to something that is medieval. Like it's generally like a medieval type architecture. Like, yes, you'll say, well, the House of Usher is not medieval because it's in America, but it stands in, and that's the thing. It's like writers have adapted these things for their locations and for their periods, and they're still writing it. For instance, the film, especially, well, and the book of I can't think of the name now. Sorry, it just escaped my mind. I should have written it down. It's the Night of the Hunter, the Night of the Hunter, and it's Southern Gothic. There's this rot. Everything looks idyllic. This preacher looks, idyllic and God fearing, but there's rot within him, and most don't see it. But there's always someone in these stories that sort of do see this, and the rot slowly oozes out, and usually engulfs people and places. And that's like, all these stories that I've said are prime, I think, prime examples of this. As I say, it's a rot it's something from the past, like usually a secret or something horrible. And in Southern Gothic, they'll use slavery for that a lot of times. New England Gothic is stuff like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Those are all Gothic, and they're Gothic in feel and in style. There's no castles, but there's things that stand in for those types of things. The architecture. There's always, or there's, I think there's always an architectural element to it, either in thought or in reality of buildings or places. There's some stories that go as far as the architecture of the mind and stuff like that. They get a little too further away, but in a sense they're not that far away. The essence is still there. It's a fascinating part of literature, because a lot of things can be classed as that, and that's sort of where horror came from. Like what we think of as modern day horror. Well, it's like Mary Shelley. That in 18 was it 1815 or 1816 that they were in Geneva, and what came from that is sort of the modern day horror story. Modern day vampire story is The Vampire by John Polidori, first attributed to not Shelley, but the other one that was there, not Percy B. Shelley, but the air poet that was hosting all this. But anyway, so that started sort of modern horror, and Frankenstein sort of grew out of that. So and it's all Gothic in feel, in texture, all the way through. It permeates it, and that's where horror actually came from. And then you get other ones that are doing other things. Some people, they write against it, and there's different shoots of horror that have come out of this kind of thing. But the foundation and the roots, to a large extent, are for modern horror is Gothic. There were horrific stories before, and stories of the supernatural, but they didn't have all these sort of elements generally together. Like nothing comes out of a vacuum. So even Horace Walpole was pulling stuff that was around at the time, and the types of stories, and drawing from medieval stories of this kind of stuff, and just plucking elements out and creating something that was kind of new, or at least the amalgamation of something that was new. it's a very complex thing, and people have multiple explanations of what Gothic is and Gothic horror. So some of it, there's just Gothic romance that leaves out the horror, and it's got everything else, but it usually still has this architectural thing. It's got the heroine and something from the past, and usually something that's not very pleasant, generally speaking. It may not be as horrific as supernatural, but there's secrets and something from the past that is impacting on the lives of the people in the story that are in the present and potentially future as well, if it doesn't stop there. But a lot of times this is where it's sort of everything that is the loggerhead, and it bursts, and that's where everything comes to fruition. All the past, all the rot just explodes in this time. So yeah, and I'm going to be reading for this week is this one here. I've showed it so many times, but it's Florence Merritt's The Blood of the Vampire, and it was written in 1897. It was sort of the other vampire novel that was done at the same time as, or published at the same time as Dracula. So I've not read it before, so I've been told it's not the kind of vampire that you expect. So I expect it's more sort of, maybe it could be spiritual or something like that, but it's all that kind of thing that still makes it, I think, Gothic. And a lot of people are reading The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. That's definitely Gothic. That has Gothic elements in it because of the rot and everything. And externally everything looks good, but there's a rot that's coming from the past, with this, through the picture and through Dorian Gray himself. But it doesn't have so much the architectural aspects, but there is architecture elements in there, but they're played down. As I say, some writers take elements and explode those into the story and leave some behind, because sometimes it's more about an anti-hero, say, or it's about the evil character in it, or it's just the romance. But as I say, it's these different elements all put together. And a lot of times some people say, yeah, they can't really define Gothic, but when they see it, they know it. And yeah, that's understandable because there is a feel to it. Even London fog, the stuff set in Victorian times in London fog can be Gothic as well, because it's got that atmosphere, that dank, dark and evil atmosphere of what, fog and shadow can create. So I'll leave it there, and as I say, there's many co-hosts that are dealing with this. Just look at one of my other videos with the listing, because I'm not going to be able to actually add it on this video for some reason. But anyway, I will end it there, and I will be getting to reading in the next day or two The Blood of the Vampire by Florence Merritt. And I hope you enjoy, and I hope you have some good nightmares. Take care, BookTube.